Well, my name's Simon. I make artist's paint and house paint. In fact, all paint, and I guess present it in an unusual way because I get lots of my pigments. In fact, a lot of pigments do come from the Netherlands, so I display it with clogs so that you get to see the different shadows and shapes and the inconsistency of colour. So that's kind of a helpful device. And I make it with linseed oil and pigments from around the world. Some of the pigments are local, but in most cases, pigment, you don't get particular colours. You're specified to particular places, so you can get ochres from south of France and Italy and Cyprus, and then you get oxides, which are effectively rusted metals. And it's a good way to look at it. If you see rust, it goes red, and that's essentially a pigment. That's a hematite or an iron ore, and that's the same for aluminium, zinc, and a variety of other copper. Famously, you get a green or blue pigment. And so I collect all these things, and then I present it in a way that hopefully makes it interesting and makes the shop maybe magical. That's the key thing. And then I, curate it. I mean, it's a sort of rather overused word, but I curate the colours and make them attractive, hopefully. I don't have a background in any kind of art. Making paint's a simple thing. It's a bit like making bread. You have few ingredients, you mix them all together at different ratios, and you get different types of bread and different consistencies, not different flavours in the case of paint. But it's simple stuff. But I actually studied philosophy, so it's not really that connected to, colour could be perhaps connected to philosophy in terms of the way that you understand and perceive things, but essentially I have an academic degree and I make paint.
So the name of your business is Colour Makes People Happy.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's probably in our hard drive. I think we seek out colour in the same way that you might, a caveman was looking for ripe fruit. So you're looking for bright, intense colour. So it's almost a survival mechanism. And I think that's probably why we're so, enchanted and enamoured by brightly, essentially, the colour of the world. The world used to be grey and brown, essentially. I mean, you get flowers and bright sunshine, but permanent colour doesn't exist, apart from in very small deposits, which are minerals and precious stones, which is why they're precious, because there's few of them. It's the scarcity principle, that if it's very little of it, it has more value. And I think paint's the sort of smart way to try and make colour permanent.
Was there a specific inspiration for starting this sort of a business?
Lack of ability to be able to paint. I like art, and I used to like painting my bedroom like you do when you're younger. And it was a way in. It was a shoe-in to being in that world. But it is. It's at the sort of the interface rather than the actual sort of action of making art. I make the paint, and hopefully in a way make it slightly artful, because it's got funny names, and there's no hiding from it. It's an arty place, and that can be a good thing or it can be a tiresome thing. Some people look at the shop and go, what is that arsey shop? But others want to come in and find out, what do you do? For me, I know people are tiringly, mad about colour, which bores me immensely, but it's like being mad about oxygen. You can't avoid colour, it's everywhere. I personally like paint. As I say, I like the idea of it trying to be permanent. That you wouldn't have had a colour like that unless you had malachite or an emerald. That only exists in paint in permanent form. You get a flower that colour, or a tropical fish, or a bird of paradise, but that's ephemeral. That will die and turn brown ultimately. Whereas paint last or stay like that for quite a long time. I mean, it does fade, but it's a feeble attempt at permanence, and I like paint for that reason. It's noble, and it's the only thing that we're surrounded by. I mean, I guarantee that most people, in the course of a day, they're surrounded by paint more than anything else. It is the thing in a room. It's in this room, it's everything. You step out there, all you're looking at is paint. I mean, there's a lot of bricks, but there's more paint. It's everywhere, it's a commodity. So,
could you explain for our readers what the process and journey of coming into the shop and curating a paint with you would be like?
Well, it probably looks sort of esoteric, but it's quite simple. You just choose a colour. You can take a colour from my colour card, or invariably someone will choose a colour and say, oh, I really like this, but can it be a bit redder? And then you're like, okay. And so then I can put some pigment in it to make it a little bit more, suited to the colour that you're thinking of, which is in some sense nonsense, because that colour there, even as I show it to you, is different here and it's different here. And it'll be different at 9 AM and it'll be different at 3 PM. So it's best to try and remember that. Just think, that's good enough, without actually thinking, is it exactly the colour I want? Because the colour you want, you'll see for 2 minutes in the day, and the rest of the day it'll be a different colour. So never become neurotic about it. Just choose the colour.
Can you tell us a bit about your colour swatches behind you?
Well, I mean, to make it even more arty, I say that pejoratively, I pair all my colours with music, so that not only do they have long, irreverent names like More Trouble Than It's Worth, which is actually named after a customer, but they are, I'll have found that colour in a film, and this one will be from the film Betty Blue. I remember a piece of furniture that colour, and then I'll give it some music that it might be. I mean, it could be anything. It might be Captain Beefheart, it might be Mozart, and then I'll pair it with some colour and in a peculiar way. I mean, if you can pair wine with cheese, you can pair paint with something else, with music, and I think that makes it quite charming. And the other thing is, it's an economical thing. You can buy these, it weds you to the colour more when you have it on a piece like this. Ordinarily you'd buy a sample pot, scratch a bit on the wall because you've never got a brush, but I've done the painting for you, and then you can see how it looks. It looks bright there and it looks darker there, and you can see how it looks with other colours. So it's a simple, hopefully clever, and amusing device. And it comes in a record sleeve, which is quite nice.
It's lovely.
So you sort of, my marketing thoughts are, you're wedded to it, you like it more. And then I have all of them in record sleeves, so hopefully ultimately the shop will look like a record shop. My ultimate aim, which is taking a long time, because if you take competitors of mine like Farrow and Ball, their provenance is always stately homes or National Trust or English Heritage. And no one lives in a National Trust building, not many people do anyway, and no one lives in an English Heritage building. Most people live in modern homes. So I don't know why the provenance can't be something else, and films is as worthy as anything else. So to paint your house in the style of the Duke of Devonshire's stately home is irrelevant, but to paint it in the colours of The Shining, a film that someone might like, is more amusing, and it becomes quite a nice thing. I mean, that will be what I call the box set, and that will be the complete works of, as I say, The Shining, or a film, the Grand Budapest Hotel, or it could be and it'll have the 26 colours that I choose that hopefully make up that film, and then they'll be available in all good shops.
And do you have a favourite film?
The best film for colour, there's two. There's The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, which is extremely colourful. There's no dialogue in it, it's all sung. And Saturday Night Fever, because in Saturday Night Fever, the main protagonist, John Travolta, works in a paint shop, and so paint shops are ultimately quite boring places to work, so you want to go to the disco on Saturday night. But if you've got a paint shop like mine, you quite enjoy working in it. I think probably the one of, I don't know, the crowning glory for lots of people that are involved in sort of retail or something, it's getting in a big department store. And to be in Liberty for a few years was a big thing. I used to supply the whole of the store. I used to do the windows. I used to make the Liberty purple, which is there, which is called You're Taking a Liberty, because they dumped me ultimately. I guess that's quite a, it's a proud thing to be supplying the paint, the first paint supplier in Liberty. In fact, the silver makeup room in there is still my paint. So I guess that would be, I mean, I didn't paint it, I just made the paint and chose the colours. But that was, I guess that's quite an achievement.
Do you have a dream project that you'd like to be involved in?
A dream project? Not really, not a project really, as much as I'd like to have a few more shops that are that people would recognise, you know, in the same way that you might go to an art shop. There's a shop in London called Cornelison's, and there's Farrow and Ball, which are now sort of in people's minds. They'll know that. But to have an interesting magical shop is enough. But a few of those. I mean, I have one in London, I have one here. I'd like a few more. That would be my sort of idea. There's absolutely no logic to naming a colour. There's no logic in any case. When people titter about the colour of a Farrow and Ball colour, or any other paint brand, actually, they say, oh, the colours are funny. They're not that funny. And so I try and make mine funny, which also means that they're not that funny, because you're just really extending the joke. But I just make them as cumbersome as possible. So there's a colour there called He Was a Man Who Used to Notice Such Things. I mean, that colour could be black. It happens to be yellow or green or whatever someone might say it is. But if I overhear someone or I think of something that's funny, like that's called What If 6 Was Really a 9? Now, I guess that's some sort of philosophical sort of...
Do you think that's where your philosophy comes into?
Not really, it's just trying to be funny. And that's like, what if 6 was really a 9? That really is deep. But I mean, it's sort of not deep as well. It's just, you know, hopefully provocative and a bit funny. And it doesn't have anything to do with that colour. But over time, it does have something to do with that colour. So that colour now becomes, what if 6 was really a 9? And that's been that colour for some years. So, but people do come in and say, oh, that would be a good name. I've got a good name for a colour. And it's normally really crap. You know, they'll think, you know, I have gold, and they'll think, what about calling it bling? And you're like, oh, you don't get it. So you just have to be irreverent and slightly cutting and a little bit, it's got to be a bit of a dressing down. So there's a colour called Withering Scorn. So that encapsulates what they ought to be, slightly withering. I thought I told you to wait in the car. You're not very subtle, but you are effective. They're sort of backhanded compliments that are slightly acerbic, or you know, faux deep. But you know, hopefully they're just provocative. That's my main aim, to be provocative.
Is there anything else you want to add?
I can't think really.
Thank you so much.
That's all I got.
That's really interesting.